Hello and welcome back to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about the recently released books. Welcome back again. This is Ray Walters. Some memoirs tell you what happened. This one invites you into what it felt like to live through it. Today's conversation is about a life shaped by heartbreak, reinvention, faith, hard-won healing, and the long road back to authenticity. This story moves through early wounds, grief, identity, health challenges, and the rebuilding that comes afterward, while asking what it really means to stop surviving and start living with honesty and purpose. The title of this book that we are going to discuss in this interview is bold and unforgettable, but the heart of this memoir is even deeper. It's a journey back to love, love for God, love for self, and love expressed through truth, connection, and healing. And it doesn't shy away from the real world paths, people sometimes take toward recovery and wellness along the way. Joining us today on the Author Roundup show is the author of Wine, Women, and Weed, a memoir of faith, hope, and love. Please help me welcome Elisabeth Mack. Hi, Elisabeth. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to have you in today's episode. Elisabeth, congratulations in getting this book published. When did this actually come out?
Uh, the beginning of December 2025, so
Wow.
just a couple months ago.
And how has it been so far?
Oh, it's pretty well received. This is my second book. My first one was Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach. And this is my second book, but this is the personal one, right? It's not professional. Well, you can learn something from it, but it's literally bearing my soul, telling my story, and opening my life up to the world so that others can take heart from my troubles and how I've turned trials into amazing life. And yeah, that it's so I'm enjoying being a second time author now.
Congratulations. What's the kindest feedback so far that you received about this book?
People are really amazed at the radical honesty. It's not many people are able to, bear all and still be standing and smiling. And so it also, the other compliment that I'm getting is that people can't put it down. It's quite a long book. There's 59 chapters, and I just turned 60, so it's kind of like one for every year of my life. But yeah, people say it's a really good read, and they can't put it down, and they just can't wait to hear what happens next.
I have to concur. So before I jump into the first question, I just want to squeeze this one in. How long did it take you to finish this book?
I worked on this book for right around 2 years. One year of solid writing and 1 year of solid editing and
Mm.
making it exactly how I wanted it to be. And that it's a process to write a book, but I like to do everything with quality and excellence. So it was worth the time.
Yes, you cannot rush perfection. Now, I want to go ahead and start with this question. I want to start with this because this helps our viewers and listeners understand the heartbeat of your memoir right away. I want to give you the room to define the book in your own words before we actually get into the harder chapters of this conversation, which I bet our viewers and listeners will enjoy. So your memoir opens with a strong emphasis on love as a guiding thread. When you look back over your life, what made love the right lens for telling this story?
Love is all that we have. When I really think about it, and actually I was writing a love story for Sherry, my
Mhm.
current wife. I've had so much love, but I in reflection, and when you're writing a book, you have a lot of time to reflect. I found that it was all about discovering self-love and the love that carried me through a hard upbringing with a unbalanced mother. The
Mm.
love that, got me through all of the chaos of various partners, and, the resilience that developed because I could keep going back to self-love. I took a self-love workshop at one point, and that helped me to really define who I am according to my values, which
Mm.
everybody should do. But this was all about reorientating yourself to loving yourself and how you see that you have been your guiding soul your whole life. And so, I think the Doobie Brothers captured it well. Without love, where would we be now? Love is everything that we have. And if all could sort of reorientate to that, we'd have a much more peaceful world.
Right. Is it safe to say that loving yourself actually is giving yourself value?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to value yourself because then all of your choices stem from that, right? If I
Mm.
love myself, I'm gonna not have that extra cookie. If I love myself, I'm gonna make sure that I get my work done so that I can be proud of my creation in this world. If I love myself, I'm going to show up and be better to others as a partner and a spouse and a nurse and all the things that I am. So it goes back to the Bible as well.
Mm.
Without love, I'm just a clanging gong or a noisy cymbal.
I want to go back to the title of your book because the next question is going to be about it.
Mm.
Wine, Women, and Weed. It's a memoir of faith, hope, and love. The title is for me bold and memorable. What did you want readers to understand immediately from that title beyond the shock value some people might assume?
Well, the title could sound like reckless, indulgent behavior, wine, women,
Yes.
and weed, right? But it truly is my my autobiography, weaving through the threads of my life. So, 10 years as the spouse of a wine entrepreneur when Warren entered the wine industry, and that was a big part of our life. 10 years as a cannabis entrepreneur in
Mm.
healthcare and therapeutics that I'm working in. So there's a lot about weed. I call it cannabis, and really more about CBD than anything else.
Yeah,
We'll
it's
we'll
CBD.
get back to. And then women, the various ways that I show up as a partner to women and to discovering the comforts that I can have in that type of a relationship where it's just loving with all that I am. Going back to love, it's the reader will follow me through these journeys. And on the wine aspect, we used to own 5 wine bars in San Diego County. And it was a wonderful chapter, and I take people through wine country and menus and how it was for that. And so, I open with wine, and of course, most people like a good glass of wine a couple times a week, maybe. So it's got all of that, all of the above, and on the cannabis side, it's I'm fighting for the legitimacy of this industry, right? Working on the health side of cannabis, and bringing therapeutics to the light. I want people to understand that this is something that is important to our healing in the collective.
Right. And that's how you framed your life in your memoir. It was through wine as a celebration and savoring life. And you have women as love, connection, and identity, and then weed, especially cannabidiol, CBD, as part of your healing and wellness journey. Um, Early in your book, you write candidly about childhood pain, family tension, and not feeling like you truly belonged. How did those early experiences shape the way you saw yourself for like many years?
Yeah. When you know, I had quite an unbalanced mother, yeah, growing up, right? She'd fight with my father, and then
Mm.
in her rage, she'd be abusive to us kids. I was the youngest, and I got the brunt of it. And so when that happens and your nervous system is dysregulated from the time you're a toddler,
Mm,
you don't see yourself as belonging. You don't see yourself as worthy because, gosh, why would the most important person in the world hurt you? And it was hard. And so, part of writing this book was a healing exercise to be able to nurture my own soul and to quiet the fears of unworthiness with love. Again, going back to that. And there are millions and millions of people who are ACE kids, and ACE is adverse childhood experiences, and then that stems into our adulthood in our the way that we
true.
think and feel, and then all of the physical conditions, chronic pain and
True.
autoimmune conditions and mental health issues and all of the above. And what I wanted to do as I was, being candid about the childhood, the family tension, all of that, was to bring light to healing. Because once you no longer conceal that in shame and internalized grief, then you can start to heal. And it takes some therapy, but obviously it's completely worth it to get to the other side where you realize it was them, not you. And now you can be whole. And once you're whole, then you show up to the world in a different way because you realize there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfect just the way that you are. It's just that the experience that you were brought up in toughened you. And there's gosh, if I signed up for lessons in soul school with God to go through these issues, I must have really wanted some hard knocks. But once you get to the other side, it's a beautiful life. And my message to the reader is that it's all possible, right? You can get to the other side of trauma and grief, and then you have your own identity that is beautiful and strong and confident because you've done the work. Byron Katie used to call it the work, where you heal your soul, and that's a lot of what I take people through in this book.
And that's what I appreciate about how you wrote this book, the how candid you were in talking about these things. And why? Because the more candid you are, I mean, we never, none of us actually grew up in a perfect setting, right?
Yeah.
We had different traumas in life. And that's what I appreciate about it, because when you're reading through it, it makes you relate. Like, yeah, this might be different from what I experienced when I was a child or when I was a kid, but all the same, it's like it makes us human. It makes me relate to you. It makes me look back at my childhood, how I grew up. And that's what I appreciate about your book. You're very honest about survival patterns, people pleasing, silence, and pushing through pain, especially people pleasing, because I can relate to that. At what point did you begin to recognize those patterns instead of just living inside them?
Well, yeah, I wasn't aware that I had survival patterns. We're somewhat immune to looking at ourselves until you get into therapy and you start getting underneath the hood, and you see that beneath the surface of the things that you do, and you start asking, why do I do that, right? Why am I, like this? And like many people, I tended to blame others. It was my mother, it was my ex, whatever,
Yep.
right? These crazy people in my path. But you have to also start to realize that you are always part of the equation, right?
Right.
There's
True.
always you. And so, but when my difficulties were framed as survival strategies with the love of a good therapist and some friends that I would then start to be more open with, I realized that I could look at myself with self-compassion rather than criticism. And that changes everything because then you realize that you were doing the best that you could with the circumstances you were given.
Right.
And you,
Right.
you make peace with your past and you have forgiveness for others, forgiveness for yourself for some of these crazy things that you've done, that I've done. And then you have that more solid, again, wholeness. And it keeps coming back to that. So, whether it's drinking too much or being reckless or taking risks or some of the things you might wish you didn't do. you can get to the other side of that, and you realize that you're just fine as you are, and you just make new choices for going forward in today. So survival strategies can come into, okay, what did I learn from that? How did I
Right.
grow? And how do I want to show up today? And that's
Right.
honestly all that matters.
Right. We look back at our past and we have a different lens if we
Mhm.
start to we see it using a different lens this time, knowing that while we are a product of the choices we made, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's something that develop us or not, but it teaches us lessons. That's what we need to, for me, at the very least, if you look back at your past, so that you can live in the present and learn from the mistakes you've had and make peace with whatever were the things that happened in the past. That's a difficult thing. And you're right. We tend to blame people. A- And and and
Mhm.
while yes, there might be people in our lives that cause us our pain, but we also forget that we're part of the equation. And for me, when you're part of the equation, you're supposed to be able to understand that at that time there are things you cannot control. You can control yourself, how you will react, how you will process things, and it's easier said than done, but
Right.
um it's something that we need to learn. I mean, for
Yeah.
me,
You have to
right?
fight for it. You have to
Yeah.
fight for, and I call it being conscious, right? My mother was very unconscious. My father was unconscious. My ex-partners were unconscious. And there are times where I am unconscious. But you have to fight for that awareness. And meditation helps. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But really going back to your center helps you to have your own consciousness, to be aware all the time.
Right. Let me squeeze this one in. Very interesting. You need to be conscious, you need to be aware, but sometimes you have this, I don't know if you do, but I'm guilty of this. I would have to say, like, there's this sense of unfairness. Like, I'm the only one who's conscious in this relationship.
It's
You
true.
know, you know, how do we deal with that when we're faced with unfairness in say in relationships? Because we're all about relationships. Like, we have friends, we have, partners, we have spouses.
Even colleagues, it comes to being brave and speaking up. Because when you're conscious and you see that the opposing partner, whether it's a colleague or a spouse, is unconscious, you could just say, you know what, I'd like you to look at this, from behind my eyes, and I'm
Mm.
looking behind yours. And you just really try and draw them into the present moment where they can stop themselves, right? It's like we're all operating on survival strategies in these loops. So if you stop and you drop into the present moment, even just say, take a breath with me. Okay, let's start over again and see where they are.
Right. It's bringing them down from, sometimes we
Mhm.
get emotionally hijacked, right? When we're full of emotions, we are emotionally hijacked. It's our fight and flight system kicking in.
Yeah.
And breathing is one way of like releasing the tension. First
Mhm.
step. Your book moves through grief in a very unfiltered way, and that's what I appreciate about it, especially in the chapters surrounding Warren. What did grief teach you that comfort never could?
I think of comfort like an endless sunny day, and grief is like walking through storms, very capricious storms. You never know what you're going to get,
Hmm.
right? And it's grief is one of our most challenging teachers, but it teaches, right? My own journey through grief was unimaginably deep, right? I was married to 15 years to Warren. I adored him, and after devastating business losses, he died by suicide.
Oh,
Um, and he not only was I, shattered as a young widow, just all of a sudden he's just gone, but he also, the business, he put $1.5 million in liens on my paid off property. So now I was also facing losing my safe haven, my heaven, this amazing property on a canyon in San Diego that was everything I ever wanted. And, that is grief that people could never really understand. I mean, a lot of people are grieving their ex-partners, their careers, their finances, etc. There are significant losses, but this was something that was so raw, that was so all-encompassing, and
Mm,
it really messed up my lens for a long, long time. I was what I say in the wilderness. And when you're in deep, deep grief like that, you are in the wilderness. I felt
yeah.
abandoned by God. And we'll
Mm,
talk about faith in a moment, but you have to just keep reorientating yourself to the present moment, to I'm okay. I'm going to get through this somehow, and
mm,
just keep going. But it was hard, and suicide is never the option. They always say it's a permanent solution to a short-term problem. We could have made adjustments. I begged Warren. I knew he was close, and I kept trying to get him help. I got him on antidepressants, and I worked as a nurse in lock psychiatry for many
mm,
years, and
yeah.
I see the devastating effects of depression on the mind and the soul and the body. And if I can share firsthand experience of what I witnessed and went through, then perhaps I can help somebody else change their perspective to see that
Mm,
whatever they're going through isn't that bad, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and to keep going towards the light.
right. And it matters a lot if someone is there. It that's difficult, especially for the one who's going through it. And thankfully, Warren had you
Mhm.
um, going through that. It's just unfortunate that he made a decision we never really wanted. You never really wanted, but it's a decision they made. And my follow-up question to that would be, how did you manage to come to terms with that?
It took a while. You don't come to terms with that kind of loss, and obviously, immediately I wanted to run. Warren was talking about how he wanted to go into the wine industry in South America. We talked about
Mm,
Argentina. We talked about other things. We were studying New Zealand, and when
yeah.
he left, I. I got some life insurance, and I fixed my house, and I was going to sell my house because I had to pay off all these liens. And then I was planning to go to New Zealand. It was
Mm,
just me, God, and the dog, right? And I wanted to take my Bedlington Terrier and go to New Zealand and just start over again. But I didn't know anybody. I didn't want to go to the other side of the world all by myself. And so I gave things away, and it's just like, okay, hold on. And then I had a brilliant moment of grace. The banker that we owed, there was a $250,000 home equity line, a $250,000 SBA loan, and then a $1.5 million loan to a private banker. And
mm,
I made payments on the other ones. And then the banker, I was able to get a jubilee where he gave me 7 years to repay his loan in full. So I was accruing interest, but it gave me time to go rebuild my life. And during that time, I also looked at what I was doing. I was the sales manager for Anthem Blue Cross for the county of San Diego, and
mm,
I was implementing Obamacare, and everybody was mad at me, the employers, the brokers, the patients, the clients, etc., because the Affordable Care Act changed everything in healthcare in the way that we approached it. And people were not happy with me. And so I was so raw that I chose to leave, and I needed to go find something else. And CBD, once I found that was a turning point, because I'll wait for your next question, but it really leads into the reinvention of myself.
So I'll jump into that. You mentioned CBD. Uh, it's one of your turning points in your memoir. Um, one of the turning points actually is your healing journey with CBD. So let's dive into that. What changed for you when you began to see plant medicine not just as a symptom relief, but as part of a bigger healing framework?
Yeah. So I first discovered CBD after a bicycle crash, right? I went out on leave to have surgery. I was still at Anthem, and
Okay.
I went to my chiropractor's office post-surgery, and she was working on my neck and shoulders. I've had three shoulder surgeries. This has been my nemesis. But she told me, why don't you have Denise work out your shoulder and get a medical massage? She'll help some of this soft tissue relax. And I said, okay, I'll go. So a couple of days later, I go in for my medical massage, and I'm like, "What is this? It smells funny." And she goes, "It's cannabis." And I said, "Why are you putting cannabis on me?" And she said, "Well, it's anti-inflammatory. It's going to reduce your pain. It's going to help you relax and hopefully get back to that pre-surgical arm faster." And I said, "Well, okay, sign me up and tell me more." And on the way home, I went to the library and checked out all the books I could on cannabis as a medicine. That was early. This is January of 2015. And I started to, I ended up with a topical, but then she also gave me some internal CBD capsules. So I
Mm,
started to take those and I started to feel better. I didn't need the Motrin so much. I didn't need the muscle relaxants. And I said, what is this? And then I started to work in the industry with her and her fiance, who owned a Prop 215 dispensary in San Diego. And then I had a doctor that was doing recommendations, and he started training me. And I kept reading, and I said, if I can reduce my chronic pain, my inflammation, my stress, if I can sleep better, I'm going to help others. And so that was that aha moment where I said, you know what? I'm leaving Anthem Blue Cross to work with these people and to pave a new road in cannabis therapeutics because if I could really help myself with a root cause, and helping heal things that were just not the acute of the shoulder, but I started to literally sleep better, to relax. And as I started to have CBD on a daily basis, my diet changed. I didn't
mm,
want junk food or processed food anymore. I started to want more whole foods. And then I realized if I added nutrition and more movement and started to meditate, and everything started to change once I started to have just CBD. And spending 30 years at that time in traditional medicine, I was tired of the quick fixes. I was tired of just dealing with the symptoms, and that's what we do in conventional medicine, right? We're not
right.
addressing the root cause, but then
Yes.
you're endlessly paying for symptoms and for
Mm,
pills and procedures, etc. But I wanted to do something different. And I had a vision, and I am a visionary. So what happened to me is, I was running an HMO, right? And so
mm,
when I went into cannabis, I'm like, I'm going to make an HMO out of that, right? So take the education, take the coaching, take the good, safe, vetted products that are standardized and consistent, and quality. So and teach people how to do it right. Because when I first started using cannabis, and I'd go to the dispensary and I said, "How did people use this for XYZ?" They're like, "Well, I don't know. Just buy the Girl Scout cookies and give it a try, or buy the edibles." And they don't tell you how to be careful. And that's what I wanted to do because, once I figured out how to upregulate my own endocannabinoid system, which we all have, an
mm,
endogenous system, just like you have an endogenous opioid system, you have an endocannabinoid system. And this plant modulates receptors in our body that are hardwired for this plant. And that is the way that we're going to heal. So once I understood that, that's all I wanted to do.
right. For those of us who are not familiar with CBD, that's cannabidiol. It's a
Yeah.
compound found in cannabis. It's not impairing, meaning it does not cause that high sensation. And we are actually still learning how CBD affects the body. But what I've read online is that using CBD products is not risk-free. Since we are already talking about CBD, what risks are we looking at when we're using it? We know that CBD is prescription based, Right.
Well, Epidiolex. If you just want to look at the cannabis plant, you can grow it high in THC, which is the intoxicating compound. That when people go to the dispensary and they buy cannabis flowers and they smoke, that's what they want. They want that high. It alters your perceptions, affects your mind, your memory, your motor functions, your mood, your perceptions, your senses, all of the above. CBD is the other side of the plant. They're the two main cannabinoids, and you can grow it either way. CBD is non-intoxicating. It's still a little psychoactive because it can relax you, right?
Mm,
But it doesn't have the same effects that THC. People don't need to be afraid of it. CBD is not active at the CB1 and CB2 receptors like THC is. That is an agonist and that plugs in. But CBD nudges about 70 other receptors in our body, our GABA, our glutamate, our TRPV1 receptors, our PPAR, keeping us safe and well, modulating the immune system, our nervous system, tapping down on stress, activating serotonin, nudging dopamine, and all kinds of signaling pathways in the body. So CBD is like that medical miracle, the warm blanket. And it is something, when you say it's not risk-free, high doses of it can interfere with other pharmaceuticals, which is why I
ah,
teach people to space a little bit, right? Take your pharmaceuticals, have a good glass of water or tea,
all right.
and
It
then
interacts with other drugs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can potentiate it. And that's a good thing if you're trying to wean off opiates or if you're trying to take a lower dose of your antidepressants. You're able to wean down because the cannabinoids can make those other medications more efficient. And so this is why, clinical medicine with cannabis is what I do, right? Because people don't understand it. They're just like, oh, I want to take CBD, but don't buy it at the gas station. It's not good.
Now, this is going to be interesting because you write as both a patient and a healthcare professional. How did the dual perspective affect the way you sort of like approach healing, wellness, and even the advocacy?
I like to say that I see everything from all sides of the coin, right? I've
Mm,
been a patient, I've been a provider, I've been a payer working on all sides of the system,
mm,
and I have a very unique perspective. It's a perspective consciousness that allows me to see from all different viewpoints, and I think that really is. Why I see things so clearly now with respect to acute care. Acute care in the hospitals, it's great for, surgeries and accidents and infections, but it doesn't do anything for chronic care. And, by the time you're my age or, anybody literally 40 plus, you're a little young still, but your body starts to break down. And what is that? It's the endocannabinoid system becoming less responsive. And when we learn about this plant, then you can understand that as you start to supplement the system, it works better. And this is like what nobody's saying, right? And so, I didn't discover how to put this all together until I left Anthem, until I left conventional care and the hat that I was wearing as a nurse, for
mm.
all of those years. I needed to look at something differently. And once I started studying cannabis, I also started studying functional medicine. And functional medicine is your nutrition, your movement, your connection, your rest, prioritizing sleep, meditating. All of the above is what is going to keep us healthy. And people don't know that. So, now my advocacy, you mentioned that word, I practice what I preach and I preach. I try and teach people everywhere I go that, are you really serving your highest interest in continuing to take all the pills and procedures? Because, the answer might be no. Wellness is something that is very different than just having the band-aids of conventional care. And like I said, I don't want to bash traditional, but it's not efficient for chronic conditions, which is what most of us have as we age.
Are we taking a step in terms of cannabidiol? Are we taking a step of making it a dietary supplement?
Yeah,
or is
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that happened December 18th, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order to reschedule cannabis away from Schedule 1, where it's been prohibited for 100 years, into Schedule 3, where it will be treated like a pharmaceutical and classified right along with ketamine, testosterone, and synthetic THC. But
mm,
there's also a CBD version called Epidiolex that is FDA approved. It's not even scheduled. It doesn't need to be. And Epidiolex is purified CBD. Now, CBD as a supplement, part of the December 18th executive order also established more of a research pathway. So we can find out exactly how CBD is going to be working as a medicine. And Medicare ACOs, accountable care organizations, are going to be examining and exploring with a demonstration project with Realm of Caring and CW Botanicals to have Medicare have a benefit for CBD up to
mm.
$500 a year. And they're going to be starting that sometime this year. They said April, but I think that might be a false start. But by 2027, we're absolutely going to be able to see something with CBD being covered because that's how important and effective it is.
And thank you so much for clarifying that. It's a good thing to know. If there are like health benefits when it becomes
Mhm.
therapeutical, there must
Right.
be health benefits when we're talking about living our daily lives, making it easier for us as we age. And that's a fact. We all
It's
age, we
anti-inflammatory.
deteriorate. Yeah.
If it's anti-inflammatory, if it reduces your stress, if it reduces some pain signaling, if it helps your body work better at the root, your digestion, your nervous system, your immune system, all of the above, your cognition, low doses of THC and moderate doses of CBD is one of the best things that you could do for your health. And like I said, if we don't address root causes, we will endlessly be paying for symptoms. And that's my message of what I preach all the time, because we can save trillions of dollars. We spend $4.5 trillion in healthcare
Right.
last year.
True. True.
And what do we get?
Faith is also woven throughout the memoir, but not in a simplistic way. How would you describe the difference between inherited religion and the kind of faith you had to grow into for yourself?
Well, throughout my life, I've always sensed faith and God. But I was all kinds of different religions. I was born Lutheran, and then we became Baptist, and then we became Pentecostal, and then I went into Catholic, and then I went into Disciples of Christ, and then I became a Methodist. So my traditional religious upbringing, gives me a good way to understand. I love the Bible, I love God, but my faith was really formed in adversity, in struggling to survive and finding my way to thriving. It fosters a completely different type of faith because enduring some of the things that I've gone through, and we talk about Warren, we talk about my mother, we talk about all
Yeah.
of that
Yeah.
and especially living with loss the way that I have been. I kind of compared myself to the biblical figure Job, right?
Hmm.
And, my mantra is just perseverance and looking for redemption. Because I deserve it. I know that, God has good things in store for me. And that is what faith is to me, right? The sense of something that I can't perceive, I can't see it, but yet I know that even though I feel abandoned, I know that God is walking with me. I know that I'm going to have a better day if I just hold on to the faith. And, the other part of faith is it helps your peace of mind. If you get into the darkness and you're in the tunnel of, no, I'm not going to have a good outcome. I'm not going to ever be able to get a house again or whatever, right? Or find love again. That doesn't do well. Your body breaks down. Your mind, you don't work. You don't operate as a human. So why not try to reorientate yourself to faith, right? I have my daily word that I read every single day, right? Today is carefree. and I start every day in prayer and meditation because I have to do that. That's part of my sanity. And I will fight for my faith every day. I still sometimes get into dark spaces and feel like I am just walking uphill all the time. It's like, when do I get to go down? But I know that with faith, if I just keep hanging on and keep counting on God and Jesus and all of the above, right? It's something that I cling to, and why not?
Elizabeth, let's also talk about how your book also explores identity, love, and authenticity in ways that challenge expectations. So, what did it cost you to live more honestly, and what did it give back to you?
Well, honestly, um, this identity. We have identities. We have identities from who we're told we're going to be. We're conditioned as children, right? And part of my conditioning was to do whatever my mother wanted me to do. What
Mm,
I had to wear what she wanted me to wear. I became what she wanted me to become. I studied what she wanted me to study. And at 17, I saw my first psychiatrist because I was having such bad anxiety as I was in college. I had just started college. And, they said I had an identity disorder because I didn't have my own core strong of who I am. I kept looking externally for somebody to help me make decisions because
mm,
I didn't have that grounding that we all should have. And parents, let your kids be who they are, right? Like, just nurture them who they are so they can get a strong identity. But for me, I was quite unsure of who I was, and I wasn't being authentic. I was being a puppet of whatever I needed to be. And I no longer do that. Obviously, I'm very strong in what I am, but it took time. It took time to be able to really reorientate myself to a strong sense of self, a self with a capital S, as my therapist used to say. Right? You've got
mm,
a small self and a big self, and that's what you want to be. And then as far as partners, I've been blessed. I had a girlfriend in college. I was thrown out of my family. When I came out, I had boys all through high school, and then I met Anita and ended up 10 years with her. But when we broke up, I met Warren. And I wanted to go back to Ben and say it's probably easier. Women are complicated, and so anyway. And I fell in love with him head over heels. And I had 15 years of the most beautiful marriage until he died, and I got that choice back. And so people are like, well, you were straight, then you were gay, then you were straight, then you were gay. What are you? And I'm like, I just love people. And for me, it's like I love the other side of whoever I'm in love with. And now I've been married to Sherry for 4 years, and I see myself dying together. We're 10 months apart, so hopefully we're gonna like age completely together all the time. But it's I wasn't playing roles. I knew that I was in love with Warren as much as I'm in love with Sherry. And so identity can be many different things. And of course, identity is our work, our purpose, how we show up every day, how we apply ourselves and our gifts and our strengths and our skills to make this world a better place. And so my identity, used to be in insurance and running sales for Anthem Blue Cross and
mm,
making money and all of that. But
mm,
now you can see, I'm not money motivated. I'm still just covering my costs. I hope to do well again one day, but people think I'm successful now because of what I've created. And it's all ripe. It's ready to actualize, and that's what's really exciting. And you can see in my book how I created Holistic Caring, merged with the Green Nurse. So now it's Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse. And then we
mm,
purchased Bloom Hemp CBD after we left the Australian team, and then running all of this myself and creating this ecosystem. I'm still building my cannabis HMO, and I know that at some point I'm going to truly actualize all of these dreams. So, what did all of this create, what did it give me? What did it take away? A lot was taken away, and a lot was brought to me. And now today, I'm living what I feel God has called me to do. Every morning in my prayer, gosh, when I first went into cannabis back in 2015, and I left insurance. I prayed every morning, and I would hold these prayer stones as I'd sit, cross-legged in my kitchen table after I'd read my daily word. And I'm like, what do I need to do today? Because I no longer worked for somebody. I was able to just do whatever I wanted to do. And I felt like God told me, write this. That's how I wrote my first book, Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach. And so, my identity has changed, but now it's so pure of who I am. You can't get me to not be me anymore.
As your story moves forward, we see not just healing, but rebuilding, like relationships, work, purpose, and
Mm.
even new ventures. How do you learn the difference between uh, reinvention and simply running from pain?
Am I being pulled towards something, or am I running from something? Right? That's
Yeah.
how I always see it. Like, I want to be pulled towards something. Like, I can't not do this. Instead of running from negativity or fear, or just doing things because I fear something, no, I want to celebrate each day, that I am doing what I'm called to do. And that is how I know I'm reinventing myself. I'm pursuing my own dreams,
Mm.
and I get to reflect on all of this. Am I becoming my best self? Am I serving others? Am I showing up in the world? Am I at peace? How do I sleep? Right? Like, all of the above is really how you want that to show. Even on, moving to Palm Springs from San Diego, because I was in San Diego for 30 years. But
Mm.
when I lost that home that I had created with Warren, I wasn't able to afford it, and we came out here, and now I love it out here. And there's a reason why I'm here, but it's also a process of surrender, right? I'm not fighting it anymore. I don't. I release, and that's, it's one of the best things we could do for our health. Is drop resistance and release and surrender. And take a breath and meditate and go back to the core of who you are, because I want to be fulfilled. I know that, I'm hopeful that money will come again, but fulfillment is everything.
Right. Reinvention could be, you'd know you're not running away from pain when you are
Yeah,
reinvention could be making significant changes to deal with your pain, to manage pain.
yeah.
It can not only be that, but also for development purposes. And reinvention is nice because you're realizing, to what you said, you're realizing goals you might have slept on for quite some time now. You didn't realize you have them, right? I'm down to my last two questions, and I want to go ahead and extend this a little bit. Um, by the end of your memoir, you describe a shift from surviving to truly living. What does this living fully mean to you now in a practical day-to-day sense?
It's my sense of wholeness, right? And again, it's, how do I sleep? How do I love myself when I look in the mirror and say, Elizabeth, I love you, right? And I feel that giddiness. That's how I know that I'm living fully, and I'm showing up. And it's like every day I'm at bat, right? Like, how many at bats do you have? And I'm hopeful that I'm going to hit some home runs. I hope everybody gets to see me. But I'm forging new paths. And that is priceless, to be able to have, and I'm blessed because I've been a good steward of money. I'm still living on some life insurance, and we have some income, but it's not enough. I still feel like I've got purpose without a paycheck in the way that I used to, when I used to run sales for an insurance company. But it's it's the acceptance and the contentment that I can express now, having my own schedule, being able to spend my days pursuing what I want. And that's priceless, right? That's living fully instead of just thriving and surviving. We talk about that, but I get to be the captain of my own ship.
Mm.
And that is amazing. And so I'm going to keep writing. And in fact, with my programs, right? I wrote my book, Cannabis for Health, Become a Coach. Then I wrote all of the programs to train nurses, to train patients on how to use cannabinoids for cancer, for chronic pain, for autoimmune, mental health, autism, epilepsy, Parkinson's, dementia, all of the above, so that I could then have something to give out into the marketplace. They're the instruction manuals for all the products at the dispensary. Are they selling yet? Not necessarily, but once medical comes back and the emphasis is off of recreational use, and people are going to start to say, then I'll be like, okay, I've been Noah, right? I'm building an ark, and now I have all of this work that will someday come into play, and CBD will be on the ascent again, and I'll be in the right place at the right time, doing the right things, and that to me is living fully.
I just want to give you, you know, the chance to tell us where to get a copy of your book. Those who are interested, for both viewers and listeners right now who are tuned in.
Yeah, if you just Google Wine, Women, and Weed, you will be able to find it on Author House, where it was published, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and then also visit my website, elisabethmack.com. And I spell it with an S, Elisabeth, Mack, Mack.com. On the website, there's all kinds of things about me, as well as how you can buy the book. And you can write me a note in the contact section. I'd love to hear from people and your experience of the book. And finally, I have a Substack. If you go to Wine, Women, Weed on Substack and even Facebook, you can find all of our work.
All right. Elizabeth, if a reader sees parts of themselves in your story, especially the parts shaped by, shame, grief, or fear, what truth would you want them to wrestle with before they close the last page or the back cover of your book?
Well, I would urge everybody to get a simple spiral notebook and start journaling. Write a couple of pages a day just to yourself, and explore all of the above, because honestly, we all carry a spark of the divine. We are all children of God. We need to find our way to acceptance and self-love. And you do that through understanding your own soul. And understanding your own soul really happens with writing, to me, right? And so that's what I would urge the reader. If anybody's dealing with, internalized grief and shame and, non-acceptance of who they are, start writing. Write yourself a love letter. I challenge you, because it'll heal you. I did the artist way. That's another thing that people can start doing, and it gives you that pathway to wholeness. There are so many good self-help, non-religious books that help you develop your soul and to
Mm.
heal the aloneness and all of the above. Because we are here to be our best selves. We are here to learn the lessons, as you said, and to love ourselves and others. That's it. It's pretty simple. And so having that journal and writing to yourself every day is a great pathway forward, or at least every other day or a couple of times a week. Be compassionate with yourself, because you are your own best friend.
Elizabeth, such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you so much for discussing your book with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Wine, Women, and Weed is something you can't put down. So go pick it up and contact me and let me know what you think.
I also want to give a big shout out to our awesome viewers and listeners for joining us for this interview. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations on the Author Roundup. I'm Ray Walters. Join me next time as we explore the world of supported self-publishing, one indie author at a time.